this is the sixth summit that we're doing for Global Voices. Global Voices is a media organization that this year is celebrating its 10th anniversary. An international, global citizen media community. And so what that meant 10 years ago is it was bloggers. It was people who had their own weblogs. They were writing online about what was happening in their countries. These days, it's a group of authors, translators, journalists who focus on social media as a whole as a way of getting a picture of what's going on in a country. So the way that our correspondents report on the Philippines is by looking at what Filipinos are saying using social media. So we have Filipino correspondents writing about Philippine social media for a global audience. And we have the same thing for about 150 different countries. So anywhere in the world, if you want to know not just what's going on, but what people are talking about, what their opinions and feelings are, that's what Global Voices is all about. Now, because we have more than 1,000 volunteers, and we have no office, there's no central office for this. This is a completely internet-based project. Every so often, we have to get together and try to have a conversation about our direction and our future. And so every 2 years or so, we get together somewhere in the world. And this year, we're lucky enough to come to Cebu. Since we're in Cebu, and since there's so much interesting going on online in the Philippines, we wanted to hold a conference to have a local conversation about citizen media in the Philippines context, citizen media in the global context, what the world should know about the Philippines, what the Philippines should know about the world. And so that's the conversation we're hoping to have as part of the Citizen Media Summit.
Yeah, because we're so curious why, of all places in the world, why Philippines and why Cebu? So yeah.
Right. So, so we move this conversation all over the globe. And we've had this conversation in Santiago, Chile. We've had it in Nairobi, Kenya. We've had it in Budapest, Hungary. We've had it in New Delhi, India. So first of all, we wanted to be in Southeast Asia because Asia is changing so quickly in terms of media. There's so much of a political change that's coming from people having free access to media. And the Philippines is an enormous leader in this space. The Philippines has one of the most open and free internets and journalistic communities. The Philippines has a long and very proud tradition of investigative journalism. So I'm thinking about things like the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. The Philippines is really where many of the people in the region look to for high-quality journalism with an Asian focus. We only will meet in countries that do not have internet censorship. And it's actually very challenging to find countries that don't have serious censorship of the internet, particularly in Southeast Asia, which has been very, very aggressive. So we can't meet in Vietnam. You know, we can't meet, even now, even after the changes in Myanmar. Because there's still quite a bit of intimidation. The other thing that's very interesting is that the Philippines has retained a really independent, vibrant journalistic tradition despite violence against journalists. And there's been quite a bit of violence against journalists in the Philippines, but there's also this very strong tradition of journalists not shying away from telling difficult stories. And then finally, you know, the Philippines is a country legendary for hospitality, legendary for connection to the rest of the world. The experience of overseas Filipino workers is actually related in some ways to the sort of media that we build. So a lot of the people who write for Global Voices are overseas contract workers. They're people who are living and working in another country and describing their country to people at home. And so that experience, which is a very distinctively Filipino experience, is very tied into some of the big themes we want to talk about being isolated or being connected with the rest of the world. as far as deciding on Cebu, Cebu is beautiful, and we knew that it would be a wonderful chance to give people a taste of the Philippines. Many people will also go and visit Manila, and they visit other parts. But we were worried that if we just visited Manila, people would not get a very diverse picture of the Philippines. And of course, so many islands, so many perspectives, so many ways of looking at things. So we're just thrilled to be there. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and we're really looking forward to learning more about citizen media in the Philippines once we're there.
We're also looking forward to this actually. When we're talking about citizen media person, who are we talking about really? What makes a citizen media?
Well, so let me give you a distinctively Filipino example with this. One of the great superstars of our community is a gentleman named Mang Palatino, who became a blogger as a way of staying in touch with his family. So he was the only member of his family still in the Philippines. Everybody else had gone to other countries for work. He wanted to keep them up to date on what his experience was while he was in college. And he started writing online in 2004 at a blog called Monster's Nest. In the process, he became an activist around freedom of speech, around the independent internet, and also around local issues in the Philippines. He's now been a two-time member of the Philippine House of Representatives. He credits social media with getting him elected to the House of Representatives. When I introduced him at our last summit in Kenya, I introduced him as a Filipino parliamentarian who happens to be a blogger. He cut me off immediately and said, "I'm a blogger who happens to be a Filipino parliamentarian." But he started this as a way of very personal communication. How do you stay in touch with friends and family when friends and family travel? He's now turned into an activist and an advocate for freedom of speech online. And when he writes sometimes about the Philippines, sometimes about Malaysia, sometimes around other countries in the region. He's looking at YouTube videos. He's looking at Facebook posts. He's looking at Twitter. He's looking at any way that people are using digital tools to express themselves online. And the idea in all of this is, how do we use these tools to share our perspectives, our opinions, whether they're personal or whether they're political? And it's very interesting to see these mixes. If you're talking to people on Facebook, most of the time you're probably not talking about politics. You're talking about other issues. But sometimes you'll get upset about something, you'll get concerned about something, and that very personal space suddenly becomes very political. And that's really what we end up sort of exploring in this. Social media is not always serious. It's not always something that you would want to share with the rest of the world. But sometimes things happen and you want to talk about what's going on in your community. You want to talk about what's going on in your country. These are the tools that we all have at hand, and these are the tools that we end up using.
Right. We're, we're aware of a lot of criticisms on citizen media. What's your take on that? Say on accountability, on the issue on ethics, and on the issue of accuracy.
So I think people are making a mistake when they try to hold journalistic standards to social media. I think if you hold journalistic standards to social media will always fall short. There's a reason we have journalism as a profession, and I think journalism will continue to be a profession even when social media becomes very, very popular. We rely on journalists to be thorough, to be fair, and to seek out the truth as much as they possibly can. All that said, that doesn't mean that social media is a bad thing. What it means is that you have to be careful about using social media to understand news, particularly breaking news. um, because social media often has not been verified. Sometimes it has an agenda behind it. So, in the same way that you don't want to get your breaking news by talking to people on the street, you also don't want to get it off of social media. At the same time, you really don't want to get people's opinions and perspectives just from journalistic media, because journalism has some blind spots. And getting people's sort of unvarnished, unfiltered opinion via social media can be very, very helpful. So we think people can do journalism in social media, but we don't think that all social media is journalism. And so what we would say is social media can be helped along by projects like ours, like Global Voices, which tries to put things in context, which tries to say this has been verified, this hasn't been verified. When we started doing this 10 years ago, this was very controversial. People said you're going to ruin journalism. 10 years later, most of the best newspapers in the world rely very heavily on social media for some of their inputs. They make it clear what they know and what they don't know. When they don't make it clear, they get into a lot of trouble. But those are the ways that these can work together. It's an incredibly important way for ordinary people to have their voice in the conversation. It's not a substitute for journalism, but it's a very powerful complement to journalism.
How else can journalism and citizen media work together?
So the main issue I work on is this question of attention. What do we pay attention to? And what happens in most journalism organizations is we pay attention to whatever is most new. So, when something happens, a politician says something stupid, or, North Korea hacks Sony pictures, we all start talking about that and we stop talking about other things. And sometimes that's a really bad thing. This newness bias has the danger of pulling us away from really big, really important stories. And I think one thing that citizen media can do really well is remind us that people are concerned with some things every day and then some things over long periods of time. So a blogger who is taking on an issue like climate change and who is writing about it again and again and again can be a very powerful reminder that we don't want to lose track of certain stories. So if we recognize that newspapers have to be new, right? The word is right in there. But we recognize that we also want to make sure that we're talking about some complicated issues over the course of months or years. Citizen media can do what we call agenda setting. It can help us figure out what are the topics we want to have on the agenda. So I think that's one of the most powerful functions.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Um, can a citizen media uh, become a journalist or vice versa?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, it happens all the time. So there are many journalists who use citizen media to promote their own work and to promote their own brand. This is pretty common, at least in the US. You'll see journalists maintain an account on Twitter, and they talk about what stories they're publishing. And when they leave one publication, they try to keep their Twitter followers. And so people become fans of a journalist, not just fans of a publication. And that's becoming pretty common. On the other side, we find all the time start writing or translating for global business, and then they get offered jobs by good newspapers or by digital media, because citizen media can be a training ground for professional media. We all have to learn how to write journalistically, and for Global Voices, it is a journalistic site. We try to do journalism about citizens. And so we have this common problem. People are writing a lot online, writing a lot of citizen media, they're writing blogs, and then they start writing for us, and then they stop writing citizen media. They've basically become during the course of working for us. And then in many cases, they go off and they go work for another organization. So, we're sad to lose them. On the other hand, maybe this is part of our job. We're trying to train journalists who know how to use citizen media, who take citizen media seriously all over the world. And that's become a big part of what we do. There are going to be several conversations happening at the same time. We're having all sorts of internal meetings for our community about where our project is going to go. We're going to be talking a lot about translation. So it turns out there are so many people in our community who speak different languages that we're going to discuss whether that might become a business for us. But those are more the internal conversations. In the conversations that we're holding with the general public, we're really hoping to learn. So we're hoping to have a lot of Filipino participation, hearing a lot about where conversations unfold in the Philippines. Is it just in newspapers? Is it in Facebook? Is it on Twitter? Where are these conversations taking place? How are we hearing people's voices? And how is that changing the whole media ecosystem? What does it mean for your newspaper that people are able to comment on stories? What does it mean that you're not just producing a print newspaper, but you and I right now are producing a video? Those are all really interesting questions about how the media environment is changing. So we hope to bring a global perspective to the Philippines. We're hoping to get a local perspective from Cebu. We're really hoping to get a window into what the current culture of journalism plus participatory citizen media looks like in Southeast Asia today. So our expectations are to come away a little bit more knowledgeable about media in the Philippines, to share some of what we're seeing around the world, to understand maybe how we could be doing a better job of covering the Philippines on Global Voices, to understand what issues and what stories are most important to Filipinos in a global perspective. I think all of those are things we're hoping for out of the conversation. I want to let everybody know that this summit is open to the general public. It's going to be held in the Cebu Provincial Capitol building. It's going to be taking place over the course of a couple of days in the middle of January. It's going to be open to everyone on January 24th and 25th. You can find out all about it at summit2015.globalvoicesonline.org. And we would love to have you there. We're going to have participants from at least 60 countries. And we're going to be having conversations about the open internet, about freedom of expression, civic movements around the world, the future of journalism, journalism in the Philippines and around the region. All of those should be amazing conversations. We've got some great international partnerships. We're going to have people there from Google and from Yahoo, as well as some of these major international funders like Open Society Institute and the Knight Foundation, MacArthur Foundation. And of course, the Sun Star is going to have a big presence. So we're really excited about that.